Your monthly subscription box from postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. When it comes to fly fishing, few things can top a woolly bugger, except for maybe a woolly bugger with a front end that looks like a fish egg. It's a fly that can be dead drifted, swung, or stripped in. Pick up one of the size 8 long-shanked hooks and get it firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. Load a bobbin with the spool of fluorescent orange 8/0 unithread. Get the thread started on the hook shank a full 2 eye lengths back from the back edge of the hook eye. After taking a few wraps rearward, snip off the excess tag. Pick up the coil of solder wire and hold it by the bitter end. Place the end on top of the hook shank above your tying thread and take 4 or 5 tight thread wraps to anchor it. Start taking touching wraps rearward with the wire behind your tying thread. The weight of the bobbin will help to keep the wire wraps sandwiched close together. After 10 or 12 wraps, hold the wire perpendicular to the hook shank and take a few tight thread wraps to anchor it. Then, pull the wire parallel to the hook shank, and as you take rearward thread wraps, rock it up and down until it eventually breaks. Take thread wraps over top of the solder wire to further secure it, ending with your tying thread at the back edge of the wire wraps. Now, snip a 2-inch long length of silver wire free from the coil. Place one end against the near side of the hook at the back edge of the wire wraps and begin taking thread wraps to anchor the wire to the near side of the shank all the way back to the start of the hook bend. Get hold of one of the fluffy black marabou feathers and about a quarter of the way down the stem, snip its tip free. It should look something like this. Alternately, you can strip fibers from one side of the stem while holding their tips aligned. These will also work well for a tail. Collect the fibers in the fingertips of your right hand and measure to form a tail a hook shank in length. Transfer that measurement rearward to the start of the bend and using a pinch wrap begin anchoring the marabou to the top of the hook shank with tight forward thread wraps. Keep wrapping until you reach the back edge of the solder wire. Then lift the excess butt ends of the marabou up and snip them off close. Make sure the marabou tail fibers are bound down really well all the way back to the start of the hook bend. Snip 3 strands of silver crystal flash free from the hank and find their approximate midpoint. Place the midpoint against the near side of the hook and anchor it with a few rearward wraps of tying thread. Pull the forward pointing portion of the material over to the far side of the hook and anchor it there. Keep taking rearward thread wraps to bind the crystal flash down on either side of the hook all the way back to the base of the tail. You can then snip the flash off even with the tips of the marabou. End with your tying thread at the base of the tail. Snip a 3-inch length of cactus chenille free and lay one end against the near side of the hook, then take thread wraps to secure it. Advance your tying thread forward to the front end of the solder wire wraps. Start taking touching wraps with the chenille up the hook shank. When you reach your tying thread, secure the chenille with nice tight thread wraps and snip the excess off close. Pick up one of the black saddle hackle feathers and strip off the lower fluffy fibers from both sides of the stem. Then strip a few more fibers from just the top edge of the stem. Trim so you're left with about a 1/4 inch of bare stem. Lay the bare stem against the near side of the hook and take tight wraps of tying thread to secure it all the way up to the back edge of the hook eye, then back down to the front edge of the chenille. Using your fingers or favorite hackle pliers, get hold of the feather's tip and begin making wraps with it around the hook shank. Start with 2 wraps, one right behind the other, then wrap rearward in an open spiral until you reach the base of the tail. There, get hold of the silver wire and use it to anchor the hackle tip. You can then let go with your fingers or hackle pliers. While keeping tension on the wire, make open spiral wraps with it through the hackle and over top of the chenille. This will cross-wrap the delicate hackle stem, thus making the fly more durable. When you reach the front end of the chenille, anchor the wire with tight wraps of tying thread. Make sure it's bound down really well before helicoptering to break the wire off close. The fly should now look something like this. You can then snip or break the excess hackle tip off close. To create the bright little spot or egg at the front end of the fly, snip an 1.5 inch length of the orangey pink chenille free. Lay one end against the near side of the hook and take thread wraps to secure it. End with your tying thread at the back edge of the hook eye. Making overlapping wraps with the chenille, build up a small sphere at the head of the fly. Anchor the excess chenille at the back edge of the hook eye, then snip the excess off close. Pick up your whip finish tool and use it to do a 5 or 6 turn whip finish, seat the knot well, and snip your tying thread free. The final step is to pick up your head cement and apply a small drop to the exposed thread wraps behind the hook eye. This will ensure they don't come unraveled. And that's the woolly bugger pinkhead. There really isn't a wrong way to fish this fly, and it works equally as well on both warm water and cold water fish species.